Afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to be kicking off this weekend's event with a really important conversation about mental health, self-care, and community care. I'm going to be joined by some incredible panelists today that I would love to welcome to the stage. So we have a lot to cover today. We're going to hop on in. For the first question, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Charmaine, and then I would love to hear the rest of our group's answers. Marginalized communities often face compounding stressors. How do systemic inequalities impact mental health, and how can we acknowledge that while still practicing self-care?
Good afternoon, everyone. So thank you so much for showing up for this conversation, such an important conversation in our community. Let me first start by saying who I am. So I'm Dr. Charmaine Jackman. I am a licensed psychologist and founder of a company called InnoPsych. And that actually connects to our question. InnoPsych offers a National Therapist of Color directory. I launched this directory in 2020 because I saw a need to really make the process of finding a therapist of color much easier. It was a huge barrier that I experienced even as a mental health professional. So that was my goal in really trying to address some systemic issues that I saw in our community. The other thing that I really focus on is the stigma. Many of us have messages that we've received from our parents and our grandparents and their grandparents around mental health and therapy. We have messages that, like, that's not for us. And so I think that becomes a real barrier in being able to, for our communities to access those services because we feel like it's not for us. So I'll start there. I'll stop there. No, my other panelists have some other information that they'd love to share around this topic as well.
Dr. Judith, would love to hear from you.
Hello, everyone. So, when it comes to underrepresented communities, it's really our responsibility to be a source of relatability for them. So in my advocacy work, I really try to gear my information, especially my social media platform with over 1 million followers, to educate people so they believe that mental health is theirs. A lot of times we run into folks and they're like, oh, mental health, that's not a us problem, that's a them problem. But I explain that, mental health belongs to each and every one of us. And I've traveled the world looking at this. In parts of the Caribbean, when people are eating the curry roti and the curry goat and the spices, that's actually anti-inflammatory food, right? When they dance side to side in African countries, that bilateral stimulation is allowing them to feel calm and to feel good. That's why it feels so good when you gyrate, All of these are elements of mental health. When you go to India and you see people going to gurus and the guru says, get rid of the ego. Well, that's another way of saying don't be a narcissist, right? So when we use language that allows people to see mental health has always been a part of my community, I just called it something else, then you realize that each and every one of us has mental health in the same way that each and every one of us has physical health. But it's up to us to actually acknowledge our mental health and to take care of our mental health so that we don't end up having a serious mental health condition.
Thank you, Dr. Judith. Dee Dee, would love to hear your thoughts.
I'm so glad that Dr. Judith mentioned the physical aspect because I am the core queen. I'm a fitness guru, fitness coach, nutritionist. That's what I do. And I'm a 20-year retired Air Force veteran. So the physical aspect of mental health is huge for me. When I'm doing consultations with my clients, I always try to get to the root of why you come to me. Because until we can get our mental right, the physical is not going to follow. When it comes to the systemic part of it, we often, like Les said, we often just don't even acknowledge it. We sweep it under the rug, or we go to church, we pray it away, or we act like it doesn't exist. And then when it comes to our mind, we may be able to numb it away, but our body keeps count. Our body doesn't forget it, and it'll show up in different ways, whether it's stress, heart attacks, anything that comes up in our body. So the things that we eat, that controls our mood and the way that we move, how our body operates, and that all contributes to our mental health. So when it comes to the Black community in particular, we really need to figure out how to unlearn some of the things that we have been doing forever, like those big Thanksgiving dinners, the things that we are putting in our bodies, the not so healthy foods, and then the excuses of not being able to move, not having time to move, because that is really, really, really destroying the community, and it is killing our mental health for real. And that is, in my opinion, that is the most important thing that we can do. When I'm upset, when I feel like I'm depressed, when I'm anxious, I dance in my house by myself, because one thing depression doesn't like is a moving target. So if you keep moving, you can kind of get it away from you and get it off of you.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I love how solution-oriented that response was, and I think it's the perfect segue to our next question. When people are looking to take care of themselves, there can be a lot of guilt tied to that, especially in communities where survival and caregiving are prioritized, and many people carry heavy burdens in those roles. If someone is navigating that tension between feeling the need to show up for others and themselves, how do you recommend they navigate that tension? Dr. Charmaine, we can start with you.
I think absolutely. We're in these times where everything is busy, it's go. I really, and many of us are caretaking of children and also caretaking of parents and other family members. And so you can feel really stretched being in the middle. I think that it's really important, and particularly I would say for women, we have a lot of messages around caregiving, right? And what that means and how that should look. But if you're not in a place to provide for others, if you don't take care of yourself, you're not going to be around. You're not going to be around to provide the care for others. So, you know, you've heard, like, put your oxygen mask on first. If you've ever flown a plane, that's an important thing. Like, you can't pour from an empty cup, right? Those are things we often say, and it's true. I also think that it's really important to think about who you surround yourself with, who's in your community. So if you see that you're struggling and you have someone who's just going to take from you, that's someone who's not going to be part of you or looking out for you. So I really think it's really important for us to surround ourselves with people who are also going to be part of that caregiving as well. Who can say, sis, you're looking tired. Can you sit down for a minute? Right? So really, really having people who also are looking out for you is really important.
Well, with my clients, I often ask them this question. I say, are you a human doing or a human being? And then they'll be like, you know. Many times we busy ourselves, we're constantly restless because we're trying to outrun something that we never processed in the past. So we think we're chasing happiness, but we're really outrunning some pain that we haven't processed. And, you know, the way that I talk about it is, you know, look at your hand every day and say to yourself, I am built with the DNA for joy. Joy is my birthright as a human being. So if I'm not tapping into joy, I'm missing out on the very point of existing. So if you find that you're taking care of others, but you're lacking joy, know that people who are joyful, they end up having better health, they have better relationships, they have better careers. Everything is better all around. So it's worth it to invest in your joy. But you don't know how to be happier if you don't understand the science of your happiness, right? Many times we read a book, we watch a show, and we try these things our friends use, and they don't work for us. We're not happier. First, you have to understand, where are the areas in your life where you're losing joy? What's making you unhappy? And then when you identify that, then you can target those areas and try to add back ways to reclaim your joy. But first, you got to understand the science of what's draining your joy before you start chasing this idea of happiness.
And I'll go back to unlearning things. So we are just taught to put others first, pour as much as we can into others, and we'll get some great thing in return. And a lot of times that comes when you have children. We're supposed to always put our children first and go all out for our children. And we hear a lot of times where people will say, I'll die for my kids. But are you willing to live for them? Are you willing to do the things that it takes to stay alive? Because right now you're killing yourself. You're doing all these things that you think you're supposed to be doing. You think you're caring for them, but you're killing yourself. So that guilt and that shame that you feel for putting yourself first, that's something that we just have to unlearn. That's a generational thing that we just have learned, and it's ingrained in our DNA to serve. We're always here to serve people, but we forget that we're supposed to come first. I used to always say, you know, go out and do something great for somebody else, but always, always put yourself first.
And can I add back to that? I love that you brought up the parenting piece. I always tell my family and my children, I'm a better parent when I have some time away from you.
I'll add to that too, because my daughter is 8, and since she was 2, I used to tell her, how many bodies did God give you? And she'd be like, 1, Mommy. So what you got to do with it? Take care of it. So if I'm not taking care of myself, then it doesn't matter what I say to her, right? She's going to mirror me. Children, they don't do what you say. They do what you do. So you have to take care of yourself.
I love that. I think that that's the perfect transition to our next question. I would love to hear from each of you. What are some small, realistic self-care practices that people can build into their routines, even if they're short on time or resources?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. So I am an entrepreneur, and when I transitioned from working a 9-to-5 to full-time entrepreneurship, I had to relearn a lot of how I worked. And one of the things, it really was about understanding how to take care of myself and how to center my well-being. So I recently wrote a book called The Black Therapist Guide to Private Practice and Entrepreneurship. And in that book, I created this soul care wheel, and I have some of these for you at the end. But there's 7 things that I think are really important, and they've worked for me, that I do every day to foster and nurture my well-being. And I always think about what is the thing that's free, and what is something you can do that's like 5 minutes or less, right? So I think sometimes when we think about self-care, it has to be like going and work out for an hour at the gym, or maybe some expensive retreat. But the best things are things that you can really capture really quickly, what you can do really quickly in your day. So there's faith or spirituality, there's rest, creating a routine, right? So think about how you start your day. One of my beloved friends, she just wrote a book, Matters of the Heart, Dr. Tamar Bryant. She says, start your day with love. And I just love that, right? And so when you wake up, who are you saying love to? The other one is, what do you feed yourself? So your nutrition. Movement is a key to that, right? So these are things that we can easily implement in our day, but it is like prioritizing ourselves and saying, I have 5 minutes or I have 10 minutes to do this thing that's going to expand my longevity as well. So.
Yeah, I have a book as well, and national best-selling book, High Functioning. Check out the booth afterwards. But what I tend to teach my clients is something I practice every day. You know how I said, look at your hand and say to yourself that you have the DNA for joy, right? Well, there's something I call the 5 V's, and if you do these 1 or 2 of these 5 things every day, it's science-based. You'll reclaim your joy. Don't do all 5 at once, because looking at the human brain, you can only handle 1 or 2 things. So just really try to take your time and increase your points of joy. The first thing is validation. So imagine if you're in a dark room and you hear a loud crash and you can't see it. Some of us would start swinging, some would start running, some would start screaming. But if you turn the light on and you saw what you were dealing with, you'd be like, oh, there was just a vase that fell, I'm safe, right? When you can name and identify your emotions, it's like turning that light on in the room. You're no longer afraid. So validate, accept how you feel, no matter what, good or bad, without judgment. The second is venting. So imagine in my lab, when people come in, I give them a big red balloon, and they take a turn dunking the red balloon into a big tub of water. And 100% of the time, that balloon will pop right up, right? It's a way to show them that if they don't slowly release their emotions and vent them over time, those emotions will pop up in your health, it'll pop up in your home life, you'll pop up in your kids, right? You'll just deal with it in ways that you can't control, right? And then you feel guilty. So slowly vent over time, and that could be through talking to God, through prayer. It could be through talking to a loved one that you trust. It could be writing in a journal, but try and express those emotions slowly so it doesn't pop up in ways that you can't control. And the third V is values. So what are the things that give your life meaning and purpose? So think things that are like your faith, your community. Tap into those daily. The fourth is vitals. That's where Dee Dee mentions, diet and movement. Take care of your body. You only get one. But one of the other ways to take care of your vitals is to protect your brain from too much screen time, because a lot of times we're spending so much time looking at bad news that we don't realize that that's a huge source of our unhappiness. And we're learning how that impacts the brain. And the quality of your relationships is the number one predictor of your health. We're just learning that, right? Loneliness is the equivalent of smoking like a pack and a half of cigarettes a day. And toxic relationships drain on your health. So you could eat all the kale you want, but if you partner with someone who's a narcissist, you're not going to have good health. And the fifth V is vision. How do you plan joy in the future so you don't get stuck in the past? And how do you celebrate your wins? So after this talk today, tell yourself that you didn't have to be here. You could have been checking out the other booths and getting samples, but you came here because you were curious about the science of your happiness and reclaiming your joy. So really celebrate that win.
Okay, so Master Sergeant Leggett about to come out for a minute. Because I don't think people understand the science behind making up your bed when you wake up in the morning. And my son screams like, why I have to do this? And when you make up your bed, it literally starts your day. It gets you in order. It makes you feel like things are off to a good start. That is really important. Make your bed. Get a routine, and it'll just flow throughout the day. Before I even get up, I literally get on my knees and I pray. That's my quiet time. That's how I recenter myself. That's how I align myself, because I do suffer from severe anxiety, even if you can't tell right now. And that's how I really can function throughout the day. I have to start with prayer. When the anxiety starts to take over a little bit too much, I go into a guided meditation where I know that I'm good, I'm safe, nothing's gonna get me, I'm okay. I just gotta breathe and relax my body, get my nervous system back in check. Of course, the food is always important. The movement is always important. If you don't have a lot of time, I always tell my clients, you have a smartphone, set your alarm every hour to just do something. When you go to the bathroom, do 5 squats. If you work from home, do 10 jumping jacks. Every hour, just set your alarm to do something, to just move, so you're not just sitting all day long. And then also, if you have, I think you just mentioned it, Dr. Judith, people around you that are not good influences, you have to get out of that echo chamber. Because I have a podcast and I talk to people all the time, and they are literally regurgitating things that are detrimental to them because nobody's calling them out on it, because they're in the echo chamber and those people think the same way. So get around people that you aspire to be like, get around people that have accomplished things that you want to accomplish, and that will definitely change your mindset and your perspective on things. And I also wrote a book as well. It's called Breaking the Cycle of Childhood Trauma. You got to get to that, because that is the root of what's happening to you right now, and you got to figure out why you are operating a certain way, and you have to get it at the root, and that's where the root is.
What I really appreciated about each of your responses is this ongoing theme that something is better than nothing. That even if you don't have a ton of time to dedicate to some lengthy practice, those little things matter. That 5 minutes of breathing matters. Those squats in the bathroom matter, which I think is so, so important. How can we better support mental health within our families, workspaces, or faith communities, especially when even now talking about things like therapy can still be very stigmatized?
Want to go first? Want to mix it up?
Let's start with you, Dr. Judith.
It is still stigmatized, but I think a really great way to show someone that you love them is to be curious about what they're going through. So there are many aspects of mental health. Many people think, oh, mental health is just therapy. But the reality is that, the amount of therapists out there, the mental health professionals, they're just so small. There's just not enough of us. In some parts of America, there's only one psychiatrist for 30,000 people. I can barely handle 30 patients at a time. So I think it's important for people to understand there are several avenues to mental health. The first one is what we call psychoeducation. It's a fancy way of saying learn about what you're dealing with, right? So in the way that, let's say if you had high blood pressure, one way to support your medical condition is to learn about, well, what causes high blood pressure? What are the risk factors? What are certain foods? What are the certain habits? Are there genetic components? The same with mental health, right? So if you're someone who has depression, learn about depression. Who's at risk? What are things that can be done to soothe your symptoms of depression? How do you live with depression better, right? Psychoeducation is a really important part of mental health, but it's a part that we often kind of just don't, spend a lot of attention in, and then we end up trying these things that don't work because we haven't really learned about it. So if you're on a wait list, to see a therapist, start learning about it. Get a mental health book. Listen to a mental health podcast while you're waiting to be on that wait list. The other thing is that many people think therapy is just one-on-one, but therapy can look very different. You can be in group therapies. And some of my patients, they've tried one-on-one therapy for years, but it was only when they found a group therapy where they met other people who went through what they were going through that they felt that they were actually making progress. Because for many years they were like, I thought it was just me. I'm the one with the bad luck. All these bad things happen to me. But when they meet people who have had similar experiences, they're like, well, it's not just me. I wasn't singled out. There's nothing wrong with me. This happens a lot. And they were able to help someone else in that group therapy, and they were also able to get help from someone else. So there are many avenues to mental health. It doesn't look like one thing.
So I want to stick to my community. I'm from Bristol, Pennsylvania, right outside of Philadelphia. A very underserved community. Very hard to come out of that. So one thing that I try to do, one thing that I do, I don't say try because I actually do it. I go back twice a year to give back. I hold huge community events under my nonprofit named after my grandmother, Evelyn's Joy Community Outreach. So I give back because not only to help for their needs, but I want them to see that there is a way out. There is hope. It does get better. There is somebody like me from where you're from, and you can get out of it. So I want to show them that if you take care of yourself, not only physically, but mentally, you can change your mindset and come out of that. You don't have to look like the people around you. So I'm actually about to do my annual back to school bash in August. I go out there, I bring horses out for the kids to ride. I have bouncy houses. We feed them, they get school supplies. I just want to make sure that I always go back so that they can see what I needed to see when I was that age. I want the kids to know that they don't have to end there. They don't have to get on drugs. They don't have to just give up. So I think when it comes to community, you have to be what you needed, and you need to be the example that you want to see.
I think the other piece that I can add to all the things that you're saying is also telling our stories. I think if you're someone who's done therapy, talk about it. Let people know what that process is about. There's so much mystery about what happens behind the therapist's door. And so the more that we can just talk about and share our stories is really important. I often do healing circles in my faith community, and that's been a great way for people to see, like, this therapist isn't some image that they have in mind, like we break it down, right? And so a lot of the work that I also do with therapists is helping them to make them and their practices more visible. I think we as mental professionals need to be in our communities more so that people know who we are, right, beyond the therapist. I love that you talked about therapy is more than just, or mental health is more than just seeing a therapist. Whether it's doing your faith practices, yoga. My pastor has been really vocal in talking about mental health from the pulpit, right? So ensuring that your pastor, bring those topics. July is BIPOC Mental Health Awareness Month. This is great that we're having this conversation here, right? I hope that you'll go back to your families and your communities and say, hey, we went to this awesome panel. Let's bring more conversations about these topics to our communities. And then a lot of the work that I do is in the workplace. I feel it's my duty to find those nooks and crannies where people aren't talking about mental health and bring it there. So we do, my company, we do a lot of workplace well-being programming where we talk a lot about joy. What are easy ways that you can integrate self-care and soul care into your day? How do you recover from burnout? Many people are facing burnout. If I were to ask you guys, how many of you have experienced stress today or this week, right? Most of you will raise your hands, right? So really, talking to your HR folks, the benefit folks about how do we bring mental health and well-being to this space. One of the things that we've seen a lot is social prescribing, which is some insurance companies are covering experiences in the arts, right? And so your physician or your therapist can prescribe you to go see a show, go see a play, right? So we're really trying to break down those spaces where we haven't introduced mental health and well-being and bring those there.
Super helpful. Thank you all. So for this next question, and for this one, let's start with Dee Dee. I would love to hear what you have to say here. If someone feels like they are at a breaking point and doesn't know where to begin, what's one first step you'd suggest they take towards reclaiming peace?
Been there, done that. I would hope that they have some type of relationship with God, because I think that's always the starting point. Anytime you get that low, that's literally where you have to go. You have to start with reaching out to Him first and asking Him to help guide you. But if we're talking specific, targeted mental health, I would hope that there would be an available therapist. If it's not, I will go back to the meditation, because I think it helped me tremendously. Like, when I couldn't get on the phone with my therapist, I literally reached out to one of my friends who has a YouTube channel, and he showed me how to go do the guided meditation, and I was like, whoa, this really works. So I think that's like very important. And then also, one of the major things that I think in this generation that causes a lot of those breakdowns is not unplugging. Like, really, some of the stuff that's really overstimulating you can actually avoid. Just step away for a minute. Quiet your mind, unplug, and just sit quietly and let some of that stuff just go, because it's not even that important. We are getting fed some things that we don't need to be fed, or we don't need to see, that we don't need to digest. And it's just the consumption of food is killing us, and consumption of social media is killing us as well, really quickly. And a lot of times, one of my nephew, he's a Gen Zer, and he's talking about how stressed he is. And I'm like, what? You know, stressed about what? I'm like, log off. But that's their life. Like, that's their entire life, and they don't even understand the concept of not being plugged in. And they don't know, like, I can just not be engaged. I don't have to be up to date on everything. They feel like they have to constantly ingest things. So I think a lot of the breakdowns that are happening right now are self-inflicted and can actually be avoided.
Thank you. Dr. Charmaine, would love to hear from you.
I love this question. I think I told you this. I couldn't wait. So I would say, even before you get to the breaking point, really, really encourage you to tune in. So our bodies are super smart. Our bodies talk to us all the time. We just need to develop the practice of listening, right? Listening to our bodies. And so I often do a body scan. So this is something you can do when you start your day. Just tune in. How am I feeling? Where are places that may feel tense or tight? What am I noticing in my tummy, right? Our gut is like our second brain. Like, what am I noticing there, right? Asking, what do I need to do? Am I doing too much right now? So I think it's really important for us to learn that language of what our body is telling, or what our bodies are telling us, and to really be able to respond to that. We talked earlier about what are like simple self-care things that you can do. Whether it's a power nap. I love to use scent. So I use scent when I start my day, in my shower, when I end my day. How do we, again, start our days with love? Like, if we're doing these things every day, we are able to tune in and know, like, when I'm feeling off. I'm from Barbados, so we talk a lot, people talk about bad feels, right? Like, I don't feel good. Those are ways that you're telling yourself something isn't right. So being able to tune into that. Now, the next part is a little bit trickier, particularly for people like us, right? We don't like to ask for help, right? So the thing is, like, okay, if you're noticing something's not right, who do you tune into? Who do you ask for help? And I think that is a huge thing that we just need to shift our mindsets around that. I would say there's no shame in asking for help, right? And that's how we are able to get better. So that's how I respond to that question. So don't wait till you get to the breaking point. Listen to your body, and if things aren't right, ask for help.
Love how proactive that was. Dr. Judith?
Well, in my lab, we study the science of happiness. And one thing I think a lot of people they don't know the difference between happiness and joy. So when we study happiness and we ask people, well, what is happiness to you? They'll say, it's when I finally meet my soulmate, or I finally pay off my loans, or I finally graduate college. But what the science has found is that when people have that type of delayed happiness mindset, when they get those things, they're still unhappy. So they keep searching for more and more. And what we found in the research is that if you actually invest in the idea of joy, the experience of joy. So joy looks like when you ate your food. Was it yummy? We were like, that's good, right? When you took a rest, did you wake up feeling refreshed? When you were feeling stressed, were you able to self-soothe? When you were lonely, were you able to connect and feel seen and loved? Those are all the points of joy. These are experiences that make life worth living. But we are missing out on these experiences of joy because we're chasing this idea of happiness. And in the research around hopelessness, what they found is that people often think that, okay, when I'm happy, and they think of happiness as a smile, then I'll be okay. But they end up feeling deflated and they feel like it'll never happen for them. So what we're focusing now on are those bodily sensations. Like when you eat your food, don't eat it in front of a screen, actually taste it, describe it, be present in it. When you're talking to your loved one, don't have the phone there. Like look at them, hold their hand, you know? And there was a recent study where they actually took the smartphone capacity away from these adults for 2 weeks, right? So you couldn't get on socials, you couldn't go on the internet, you could only use your phone like a flip phone to call or text. And what they found was that after 2 weeks, it was almost as if these people had taken an antidepressant because their happiness scores went up. Why? Because they were spending time in nature, they were talking to each other, they were getting better rest. All of those points of joy that we measure in the research, they were getting more of those points. So it is important to tap into those physical sensations of being a human, right? You're a human being, not a human doing. Spending time in nature reminds you that, you know, the chance of you existing is so small. Think about it. The chance of every single one of you is so small to exist. So you're here for a reason. And when you're in nature and you see that sunset, and you see that beautiful water, you're like, wow, the universe is so spectacular and I'm here for a reason. All of those experiences remind you to be hopeful and connect with people like your nephew, right? If you're on those screens, you're not connecting. And loneliness is the equivalent of smoking a pack and a half of cigarettes. So reach out to people, really look at them, connect with them, touch their hand. It releases oxytocin, that love hormone that attaches you to others, that brings you, you know, natural joy. All of these experiences of joy is actually what makes you happier.
And if we were to ask the audience, what do you do for joy? I bet everybody would have something to say, right? Yes? You get some head nods, right? And so it's more also just doing more of that, more of those things that you love to do, finding that time and craft, put it on your calendar. Because for me, if it's not on my calendar, it doesn't happen.
Put it on the calendar so we know it's real. So when it comes to mental health, boundaries can be a really important tool for preserving our mental health, but sometimes having strong boundaries can be really hard. So I would love to hear from each of you a time when you had to set boundaries, personally or professionally, to prioritize your mental health and what that experience taught you. Dr. Charmaine, we can start with you.
Boundaries, it's a daily thing for me. As a parent, as a daughter, as a wife, as all those things, as an entrepreneur, I would say the hardest person to set boundaries with is actually myself. But so thinking about a time that I had to set boundaries, I would say it has come up a lot in my workplace. And I knew I was doing something right when my supervisor, my boss, would say, you know, I'm not going to answer you this thing because I know you have boundaries, like it was a bad thing. And so it was really about me really understanding my time, navigating my energy, and knowing what I contributed to the workplace. And so because I knew I was doing what I needed to do, I was not afraid to say no sometimes. But it's something I had to learn, because often I would say yes. I naturally lean to people pleasing, And so, being able to develop that muscle of saying no, or understanding what things will cost me if I say yes to them, has been really important. So I've had to learn a lot of those messages along the way, and learn the hard way, because I often would overextend myself. So being able to say no to people, it's saying yes to myself.
I agree. I think it's really difficult to set boundaries with yourself. So for me, I have to ask others around me to help me. I run a lab, and 5 years ago, when I was in my most lack of joy and hedonic self, I made a decision. I was like, everyone in this lab, all of my team, I was like, you all have to make sure we close at 5 p.m. every day, no matter what. I want the lights off. And I'd be there like typing away, and they'd be like, lights off, Dr. J. And I'd be like, no, 5 more minutes. They're like, nope. They set the alarm, and if I didn't run out, then the alarm would go off, right? So I needed to ask my team to help me with that. And even with my 8-year-old, like if I get into my high functioning ways and I'm like busying myself, she'll look at me and be like, Mommy, I am tired, aren't you? And I'm like, you know what, I am tired. We're not doing that. So I think look at the people in your life who are there for you. If you don't have someone who's there for you, listen to your bodies, right? Like I know if my nails are chipped and my hair is looking split ends, I'm like, I need to take care of this. If I'm not making time for my bi-weekly manicure, that's a problem. How am I gonna tell you how to live your life when I'm looking like Who's Shot John, So I think if you listen to the people in your life who love you, who look out for you, and then you listen to your body, you'll know that you're either setting good boundaries to protect your joy, or you're letting your points of joy slip away from you.
So my hardest boundary that I've ever had to set was, I think you mentioned earlier about toxic relationships. I was in a toxic relationship for 5 years, and it was very difficult for me to let it go. It's been a year now, so I'm happy about that, because I couldn't go 3 months. So it was an emotionally abusive, physically abusive, mentally abusive relationship, and I just couldn't figure out how to get out of it. He was an extreme narcissist, and I didn't know what that was at the time. I was fresh out of the Air Force, first time dating a civilian, so I was really institutionalized. I didn't really know how to navigate in the real world, and of course he took advantage of that. So when I finally set the boundary, it was extremely hard, because I just didn't think that I would be able to navigate this world by myself, because he made me feel that way. But listen, once I did it, the light bulb came on, the floodgates opened. I mean, I started really enjoying myself again. Like I found who I was outside of being under the military's thumb and then under his thumb. And that boundary has never been crossed again. I don't even tolerate the slightest disrespect at all. And I mean, that boundary, I teach it to other people. I showed my daughter how to do it. She just got married last weekend. So I'm extremely proud of myself for setting that boundary with that.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I think we've covered so much amazing ground in this conversation. Before we go, I would love to hear from each of you as like a takeaway for the audience, maybe one tool or app or practice that has helped you ground yourself when it comes to protecting your peace that maybe they can try out at home.
That's hard. I have so many. So I'm going to direct you to this. And like I said, I have copies. I'll be over in the book area, so please join us over there. But the other favorite thing that I love to do besides these 7 daily habits is I love scents. So I love lavender, I love eucalyptus, I love bergamot. So what I've done, I incorporate that scent into my day. So I'll spray or sprinkle some of the oils in my shower at night. And it has this amazing ability to just bring down my nervous system and help me really calm down. I also create these rollers with the scents that I love. And so sometimes if I'm nervous, I'll put some by my wrist or behind my ear. So those are really simple things that I incorporate. And I love those things because they're easy. Nobody knows that I'm doing them.
I have a tool that is in my book. It's called the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding method, and anyone can do it. That's why I brought this cup here. So ideally you do it with a cup of a beverage or something flavorful, and you list 5 things that you can see. So you list 5 things. I see the color of the cup. I see my fingernails. I see the coffee inside. I see my red pan. I see the floor. 4 things you can feel. I feel the cup. I feel my fingerprints, my fingertips here. I feel the couch. I feel my feet on the floor. 3 things that you can hear. So I hear the crowd. I hear the fluid in here. I hear the sound of me swallowing. 2 things that you can smell. I smell the beverage. It's really yummy. I love coffee. I smell my perfume. And 1 thing you can taste. That was delicious. So you notice if you're doing that, you're only focusing on 1 thing. It's really hard to think about, okay, I have a flight to catch later, or I have something last week I didn't do. I'm so present in this moment. And if you can practice doing this even 1 to 2 minutes a day, you're retraining your brain that you can ground yourself. And it's important to ground yourself because, our community is one of the most highly traumatized communities. So our fight or flight, our restlessness looks like overworking, overbusying ourselves because we're trying to outrun the past. So doing these grounding tools helps us to stay present and calms that fight or flight naturally.
Y'all know what my tool is. Move. Do something daily, every day, move. Because my biggest fear is having my children push me around in a wheelchair. I want to be able to move until I'm no longer on this side of the dirt. I have some tools too. I'll have them over there in the book area, but make sure y'all move.
Please give it up for our panelists. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.